We're back with another episode of App Stories, a Mac Stories podcast all about the world of apps. Today's episode is brought to you by Screencasts Online. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing great today. You know, we haven't talked about our favorite topic in a long time. I went back and in episode 37, we talked all about our ideal email client. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to dig in to the world of email, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But first, Federico, we have a little bit of follow-up.
Okay.
Because you and I had a good episode last week all about AI and training in particular, training of large language models. And at the time we recorded that, we had not taken any action with respect to how Mac Stories is, how Mac Stories is set up to deal with that environment. And in the meantime, we have taken some actions. We wrote a story about it on Mac Stories, I did, and I will post that in the show notes here. But what we did is we took a four-prong approach to large language models. The first thing we did, and I want to, the reason I'm bringing this up, I don't want to talk about AI all summer, Federico.
No, me neither.
But we did do some things, and I want to be abundantly clear about what we're doing because there's been some confusion here and there. The first thing we did is we revised our robots.txt file so that it asks the AI crawlers, the web crawlers, not to crawl Mac Stories or App Stories. Those two websites.
Just the AI bots. Just those
Just
crawlers.
the AI bots, right? And these are only AI bots that are identifying themselves as AI bots because there are some that maybe are not doing that.
Yep.
So we did that first. But of course, that's nothing more than really a warning sign. Please, saying, please don't scrape our site, which wasn't enough in our mind. So what we did is Rob Knight helped us to implement basically the same thing, but server side, so that if there is an AI bot, including Apple's, that comes by to sniff around MacStories.net or AppStories.net, it will be prohibited from doing so. It'll return a 403 error. That's what happens.
Yep.
All right. We have not blocked services. We have not blocked bots that are not specifically AI crawlers. For instance, we have not blocked Google because we still want to show up in search results.
Yes,
and that's not ideal. It's not ideal not to be able to block Google. The same goes for Microsoft. We haven't blocked them because we do want to show up in search results, and we don't have a good solution for blocking their AI crawlers, so we haven't blocked them. We're also not blocking anything else other than these crawlers because, for instance, someone asked us if we were blocking the Internet Archive because obviously the Internet Archive has a lot of Mac Stories content on it. No, we're not doing that. That's their site. We're not blocking them preemptively to try to keep Mac Stories content off the Internet Archive. We're both fans of the Internet Archive, and we're not trying to undermine their mission.
Yep.
We're not blocking anything else that you can imagine. It's literally just web crawlers that are identified by their makers as artificial intelligence web crawlers. So that's I guess as clear as I can be. The other thing we've done is we've actually created a terms of service that we've posted on Mac Stories. You can go to the bottom of the homepage, you can click on it, and you can look at it. And this too, I want to be really clear about what we're doing here. We have said in those terms of service, there's lots in there, but basically we've said we are not consenting to the use of our content for artificial intelligence purposes, for training. And this is all about training for commercial use.
Yep.
Companies like OpenAI, Apple, Perplexity, all of them. They're not entitled to do that. And they should comply with that because that's a legal document. Who knows if they will? That's another story. You are still going to be allowed to quote Mac Stories.
Of course.
Whether it's for personal reasons or commercial reasons. In other words, 9 to 5 Mac can quote from one of our stories as long as they attribute it to us and link us, which they always do.
They always
That's
do.
not changing.
One of the few websites that do. but
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not changing that. We're also not changing your ability as a personal user to use the content in something like a read later app, that kind of thing. Share links with your friends, whatever it happens to be. The only thing that we're doing that's different than what we did before and that we were okay with before is we're saying very explicitly, that no company can use Mac Stories content or App Stories content for that matter to train large language models. So that's all we're really doing. And I would say the fourth prong of this really is none of these solutions of these three things I've described are perfect. There are holes in this defense line. Some people have told us it's not worth even bothering if you can't have a perfect wall. I don't agree with that. I think that we should have the best wall we can have without harming the experience of the people that read the site and listen to our shows. And that's why the fourth prong of this is we support legislation in various government bodies around the world to regulate AI training for commercial purposes. In other words, the creators of content on the internet, whether it's a publisher like us or an artist drawing a picture and putting it on the web, should be compensated for their work. And they should be compensated by the AI companies. So I think that's about as clear as I can be about it.
Yeah, look, it's very simple. We just don't want AI companies with that have obviously commercial gains. It's all about commercial usage, and maybe some people cannot tell the difference between a personal usage and commercial usage. I thought it was pretty clear cut, but obviously some people seem to not see the differences. We do, and we just don't want. I just don't feel comfortable. You, John, also. As my business partner, you also don't feel comfortable with the idea of any commercial company coming in and scraping the entire contents of an article or my entire website and using that text for any commercial gain. I'm not okay with that. I never was, and I never will be. And so we're not blocking anything else. Search engines, we have been okay with search engines forever. The whole purpose of a search engine is to surface content and drive people to the destination website. So it's just AI companies. This is an opinion we have, and I strongly believe this is the way that I'm built in life in general, and I think you're the same, John. When you have an opinion, you need to strongly hold that opinion and make people respect that opinion that you have and do everything in your rights to make sure that that opinion is respected. And so that's what we're doing. I've never been the type of person who just gives in and accepts things for what they are. When I see something that is not fair, I speak up. And this is our website. We decide who we want to serve and how, and we serve readers, not other commercial companies.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said last week, Federico, the pizza is the model. Just keep in mind the pizza.
Well,
it's all
keep
about
that in
pizza.
mind. Keep in mind. Boy, I've been craving pizza since last week. So
have I. I had some really good pizza in Cupertino, by the way, a couple of different places.
Did it have glue on top?
No, it had zero glue. It had some very nice fresh mozzarella and basil. All right, Federico, that's enough about AI. We're going to get off the AI train for a little while.
Yeah, that's it. We're done. Yes, moving on. You know, we have lots to talk about this summer.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Screencasts Online. We love our Apple devices for their innovation and their style, but it can be hard to keep up with the ever-evolving world of apps and services. Screencasts Online is on hand to help. They've been providing video tutorials for 19 years, so you can unlock the full potential of your Apple hardware. Screencasts Online is for everyone, regardless of their skill level. Each tutorial is designed for maximum learning in minimal time. So stop struggling with unfamiliar programs and unlock access to all their exciting content, from new releases to old favorites, all without breaking a sweat. So how does it work? Each week, Screencasts Online publishes a 30 to 40-minute Apple-related video tutorial, as well as a shorter 10 to 15-minute tip video that gets added to its ever-expanding library of over 1,300 tutorials. As a member, you have access to the whole archive, which you can access through Screencasts Online's website or through their dedicated Mac and iOS app, or sit back and watch on your Apple TV. You'll also get access to issues of their monthly digital magazine, which is filled with the content that helps you learn more about all aspects related to your devices, with original articles from celebrated contributors such as Don McAllister, David Sparks, Allison Sheridan, and more. So if you want to improve your skills with macOS, iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, and with applications like Alfred, OmniFocus, Hazel, DevonThink, GoodNotes, Text Expander, Airtable, and more. And soon, Vision OS and Apple Intelligence as well. Then a subscription to Screencasts Online is for you. As an App Stories listener, you can get 20% off a monthly, quarterly, or annual subscription. The discount is applied with each renewal for as long as your subscription is active. Just go to screencastsonline/app stories and choose your plan. That's screencastsonline/app stories to get 20% off your plan and get access to the whole library. With so many hardware and software updates coming, there's never been a better time to join Screencasts Online. Our thanks to Screencasts Online for their support of the show. We do. And I wanted to talk to you about email because, as I said at the top of the show, we talked about this in episode 37, which feels like a million years ago because it kind of was. And the landscape of email apps, I'm not going to say email clients because last time we did an email episode, I still remember people giving me a hard time by saying something like MimeStream was an email client when it's actually an email app. There are, people like to correct you on the internet.
But do? Anyway. Really? I haven't noticed.
The apps you use to get your email messages is a topic we haven't covered in a very long time. In a lot of ways, the landscape has not changed that much.
That was my biggest takeaway also. Yes.
But there are new entrants. There are new technologies and tools to handle email. And I thought it would be a fun thing to revisit because we have new wishes. At least I do. I'm assuming you do too, to talk about how we manage the deluge of email we get every day.
Yeah, that was the thing I also realized in looking back on that episode, that really the landscape on iOS hasn't changed much. We're still talking mostly about the same apps. Two things I will point out is that fewer and fewer indie developers are making email clients. Yes. The only one I can think of is MimeStream or email app, call it whatever you want, but it's made by a small independent team. That was not the case years ago, which maybe speaks to the consolidation that we've seen in this space, right? Between Apple Mail, Outlook, Gmail, Spark, and a few other big players more on the enterprise side. Really, things have not changed much. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that I'm seeing a lot of email apps and email clients take the business route, sort of appealing to corporate customers, to large teams, email clients that can really monetize using subscriptions for, people who need collaboration, people who need comments, people who need sharing, people who need fine-grained permissions on inboxes, that sort of stuff.
Right. That's absolutely the thing that I think has changed is that while we have seen MimeStream in particular, which is native on the Mac and has an iOS and iPadOS version coming, most of the new email clients that I've seen have gone the web-first route. Yeah. Things like Missive, Shortwave. I think last time we spoke, Superhuman did exist and is, still kind of a overhyped expensive mess as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure it works fine.
Very, very expensive.
It's very, very expensive. But that's they kind of led the pack. That's kind of common with all these. That's even true. Missive and Shortwave are not. Those are not cheap subscriptions, especially if you end up doing it with a team of people and they're charging you per head. This is a model that's a lot more like Slack than it is like Spark, for instance.
Yeah, and to be fair, I did try Superhuman a couple of years ago, and I do think it's a pretty good app if you're a CEO. I think it's an excellent email client for CEOs, like people who live in Gmail and Google Calendar, who schedule a lot of meetings, who have disposable income, and can spend a ton of money on this. Arguably, it can be a very powerful email client. I just don't see it as a personal or even prosumer email client. I think it's an email client for CEOs or people who manage a lot of meetings, people who maybe work in PR, live in Google Calendar, people with a very Silicon Valley type lifestyle.
I think it's that prosumer small business category that is not very well addressed right
Yes.
now in the email
Yes.
space, because, for instance, there are aspects of things like missive and shortwave in particular that I like and I think would be useful to us, such as having shared inboxes, assigning emails, having inline communications. Some of these things Spark has. So that is one option that I think is a little bit better tailored towards kind of a small business or prosumer market. But to get things like that from an app like Missive or Shortwave, you end up spending a lot of money to get a lot of other things too that you may not need. And I just know this from the process of having gone through these things periodically and thought about, is this something we should do with Mac Stories, especially with the fact that we have, more people now? And the conclusion has always been, yeah, maybe, but it's an awfully big spend for what it is, for what we'd actually get out of it.
I think over time I've come around to realizing that what I like, given how much I work on iOS and iPadOS,
Mm-hmm.
that what I like is an email client that feels native to my iPhone and iPad, that has that native feel. And I think if I was forced to choose between, do you want to have an email client that lets you share messages with your team, or do you want to have an email client that feels right at home on your iPhone and iPad? I think I'm always going to give up sharing and prefer the native feel of an email client on the iPhone and iPad instead, which is why for this episode, I wanted to say that the one thing I'm really looking forward to, and sure, it's going to be an Apple Intelligence feature, and I have expressed my thoughts on Apple Intelligence, and I have my opinions about how some of the language models were created. But, Mike said this on Upgrade, I think, that it's totally fine for the same person to hold two opposing views on a topic. And I think that's very wise. It's a very mature and grown-up thing to say. And so I'm also going to say this, that despite my opinions of Apple Intelligence, the one when it comes to how data was collected for training, at the same time, as a consumer, I'm very much looking forward to the smart categorization they have shown off coming to Apple Mail. Because the one thing I realized, I stopped using a while back SaneBox. Not because it was not doing its job, but just because I kind of wanted to see, hey, what is it like to work without SaneBox? And boy, do I miss the categorization of email in my inbox between, these are newsletters and these are promotions, these are social updates. And so what Apple has shown off with Apple Mail gaining that sort of integration, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. I would say this, Federico, about the Apple Intelligence part of this. First of all, we don't know how the email model was trained. Apple's using all kinds of... Apple's using different models and different, machine learning training for different things. So I don't know whether or not the things that we object to in terms of training models were used for email. But even if they were, I think it's perfectly okay to quarrel with how the model was trained, but like the technology and the product that is the result. And some people will say, well, you couldn't have that product without having had that sort of training. I'm not so sure that's true. But that is a topic that we've already covered and we're not going to cover again. But I do think that I wanted to make the distinction only because I think our quarrel is very specifically with the training and the commercial use without compensation and not with the technology and how it's implemented. Features are a different story. And I agree with you. I think that I have used MimeStream for quite a while now. And because it uses the Google APIs for Gmail, the categorization there is already being done. And I rely on that very, very heavily. And I'm really looking forward to it coming to Mail. I don't know what I'm going to do with email at this moment. Right now, I'm using 3 email apps, Federico, and it's terrible.
I feel like we literally did that episode years ago, coming from the same perspective. Yeah. And I think we're following up on that episode, but I don't think we've actually fixed anything.
No, we
maybe
haven't.
the one thing we realized is we have a more complete view of the things we like and the things we need.
That's probably true. So, just to give people a quick overview, I'm using MimeStream, I'd say 90% of the time, because my Mac is usually where I do my email. I'm using Mail for on the iPhone and iPad, primarily for my iCloud account, but also for when I'm not at my Mac and I get email to any of my Gmail accounts. And I'm using Spark because while we don't do a ton of email sharing, we do some, and it's just easier to use that sharing feature than it is to be doing a lot of forwarding of messages.
Well, that sounds like a fun setup.
Yeah, it's a great setup. The one that I think I haven't really, and I don't really know where this is going. The reason I say that is because MimeStream is going to be doing a beta over the summer for iOS and iPad OS, at least iOS, maybe not iPad OS. I sure hope iPad OS, but I don't have it yet, so I don't know. And having that unified across all those systems would be fantastic, but it also doesn't solve my iCloud problem. And some of what I like about MimeStream is, in fact, coming to Mail, which is, as you already said, the categorization. And then Mail's also going to get a summarization thing, which I remain skeptical about summaries. I have found in general that AI generated summaries are not very good. The Reader app by Readwise has them, and I never find them. They're there, but I don't read them because I don't find them useful at all. I mean, I save something to read, not to save something to read its summary. I mean, I don't really understand why things like that are there. Email, maybe, especially if it's a long, convoluted email, which I do get those sometimes, but I still need to know what's in the email. That would at least help me further prioritize. And the other thing I would say is about that prioritization. If it's done automatically by the system, I sure hope you can override it and say, no, this one should always go to the top. You know what I mean? Like if for some reason it said my messages from you are not a priority, I'd like to be able to override that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so besides categorization, I think obviously what I always want from an email client, and I think I mentioned this years ago, is reliable search. This is just one of
Yep.
the things that I'm always going to mention. Search needs to be fast, reliable, and ideally, Apple Mail still doesn't have this. I want to be able to see either recent searches or create saved searches for things that I routinely look for in my email client. I should be able to create a saved search. Just like I can in other apps, I should be able to do the same in Apple Mail. And I don't know. I wanted to ask you about this. I'm a little ambivalent about shortcuts integration with an email client. I do see a lot of benefits in terms of automating some aspects of your email client using shortcuts. But personally, I feel like rather than shortcuts as we know it today, what I would like to have is a rethink of mail rules, not just necessarily shortcuts integration, but just a UI to design rules for filtering email just like you can on the Mac, but instead on the iPhone and iPad.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think that there are a lot of problems with trying to automate mail with shortcuts simply because you're dealing with things like attachments. Some
Yep.
email is plain text, some email is HTML. There's all kinds of issues there. I think maybe what I would like, in addition to something like you're describing, is maybe a quick actions type idea where I could grab I could either I could right click on an attachment and send it into a shortcut that way. Like find a way to get a subset of the data that's in an email and send it elsewhere a little more easily. I really do like, for instance, what Spark does and what MimeStream does, which is allow you to generate deep links back to a message. That goes an awful long way. If I can take a deep link to a message thread, put it in things as part of the notes field for a task. And that way, even if I've moved that message into a folder or archived it or whatever, I can still get back to it because I have the deep link. That's that goes a long way to helping me kind of automate
Hmm.
what I need for email.
I'm going to give you one small teaser for something so by the time people will listen to this, it's going to be available in Mac Stories Weekly.
Hmm.
But the thing I'm working on for the newsletter for club members this week is I've realized something that's been possible for the past several months, which is I discovered that on the iPhone, you can start dragging a message from the Mail app. And then if you press the action button, and the action button presents you with an action for Task Manager that has a text field to enter
Hmm.
a link for the task, you can just drop the message right there
Yeah.
in the Shortcuts UI, and that becomes a deep link for reminders or things or OmniFocus or Todoist, whatever you want to use. And so I will explain what I'm doing in Mac Stories Weekly. That's one of the things that Apple Mail has all the sort of underpinnings to do this kind of stuff for power users, and it's just too hidden from view sometimes. I think I don't know, like honestly, I don't have a lot of wishes when it comes to like the categorization was my big thing. I would love to have safe searches. I would love to have um, the ability to automate incoming email more than automating like the actions that I perform on an email. Like I want to filter and automate with the native Apple UI. What I'm gonna mention is I have high hopes for what Apple has showed in terms of the design changes coming to Mail, which again I keep coming back to Mail because I think if those features are done well, it could become my default email client later this year. It's still gonna lack push notifications for Gmail, which I know some people cannot live without.
Right.
But if in addition to categorization, they can also nail the design of like the newsletters, and when you tap on a profile for a business that's sending you emails, like an airline, for example, and they give you this digest view of all the emails from that sender. If they can nail that design, and if they can implement summaries that are shown underneath the subject line in your inbox, and those summaries are actually useful, like I do think that all those improvements taken together could make Apple's Mail app, despite its many problems and limitations, my go-to email client later this year. But that said,
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm also very much looking forward to MimeStream.
Right, right. And I could see the same thing happening to me. I think that things where mail is going to going to have a tough time for me is with search potentially,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
the search, because it's built on the Google APIs on MimeStream, is very, very good. It also has things like, it does the same kind of auto completing of text as you're typing that you get if you're in the Gmail app or on the website, which actually is quite well done, and it works pretty well. Those things I would kind of miss. I also would love to see Mail have some kind of screening feature. Let me look at what has come in before I actually go to my inbox and block emails, because I block email every single day. And I use an app called Clean Email, which is quite good, but it does not work. It's not working at the server level. It's basically shuffling the email off to a hidden folder and then waiting for you to go into Clean Email and say whether it should go to your inbox or it should not, or it should just be deleted, I think is where it goes in the trash. And I would like that to be integrated more tightly, where I could actually use a screener and it just never even pops up. Because right now, even though I'm screening my email with Clean Email, if I go to my all mail view, I'll still see those emails. They're still technically there. They're just not in my inbox. And I do rely on the screener quite a bit.
yeah. I don't think I have anything else to mention. I guess compared to a few years ago, I am more optimistic than ever about Mail, but that's largely because of Apple Intelligence. There's also, and like I said, there's MimeStream. And I think over the past few years, we have tried a lot of these business-oriented tools. I've tried Superhuman. I've tried Missive. I've tried Shortwave. I've tried Hey a few years ago.
Yeah.
We've tried them all. And I think like over the past year, it's always come down to Spark, Mail, and MimeStream.
Yep.
And I think judging by what we've seen, 2024 will mostly be about Apple Mail getting its intelligence features, and MimeStream coming to iPhone and iPad finally. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. But these are the two big players I see that on the horizon that could be what I start using as my default email client.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'd like to get down from 3 email clients to 2.
Yeah, that I think that will happen. I'm positive that at the very least you will get rid of one.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping, because right now I kind of ignore my iCloud account because I'm mostly in MimeStream and occasionally in Spark. But yeah, it hasn't, the landscape hasn't changed much. We're not seeing a lot of small apps coming up on the horizon, but I do think we have some nice updates coming between MimeStream coming to other platforms and Mail's updates coming in the fall, that there are going to be some, hopefully, better solutions for at least our email setups and hopefully a lot of listeners too. All right, Federico, that's a good episode. Why don't we wrap it up there? I want to thank our sponsor again. That was Screencasts Online. You can find the two of us at macstories.net. We are also on Mastodon. Federico is at Viticci, and I'm at John Voorhees. Just go to viticci.macstories.net or johnvoorhees.macstories.net to find us and follow us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.